I'm going to say a little bit about the new Administrative Data Research Network that has recently opened for applications for access to data. To give a little bit of background, in 2012, a major task force was brought together, including a lot of senior heads of profession in government, other interested parties, academics with experience in this area, as well as some of the major funding councils. From that task force, a report was produced that made recommendations for how to maximise our research use of administrative data within the UK. On the back of that, the Administrative Data Research Network was set up. The structure that was recommended, we have a structure that includes 4 administrative data research centres which have a secure infrastructure in which data can be accessed. They also have expertise in data support. Overarching those is administrative data service, which is providing a coordinating role for the centres and is acting as a first point of contact for researchers who wish to access administrative data. We've been incredibly careful in setting up, we've tried to be incredibly careful in setting up our governance and oversight. We realise this area's, there are a number of sensitivities in this area, and the task force was very explicit on how we should be set up. To start off with our board, our board is convened by the UK Statistics Authority and reports directly to UK Parliament. We have a management committee which is made up of the principal investigators of each component of the network. That reports to the ESRC, the Economic and Social Research Council, and through that the ESRC reports to the Department for Business Innovation and Skills. All projects requiring access to the data are scrutinised independently by an approvals panel. This panel is made up of experts that are entirely separate from the network. It's chaired by Ian Diamond, and it contains lay members so that we get a public perspective. So it's not. We were very conscious that those of us who are embedded in this field tend to see things in a certain way, and we think we have an understanding, but our understanding might not be the same as the wider public. So we wanted to be very certain we captured those opinions as well. We also have a range of scientific advisory groups advising us on different levels. These come and go as we need them, but the 2 key ones that will run for the whole of the duration of the network are an information assurance panel that will advise us on our personal information assurance policies and also advise us on any changes and adaptations, any new research that comes on board, because obviously this area, as everyone has touched on, is a very fast-changing area. So we want to make sure that we're always up to date with the most recent discoveries, the most recent any legal provision that's made in this area. As mentioned before, we're funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. We're funded as part of their big data network, which is in 3 phases. The first phase was the Administrative Data Research Network. The second phase, which has recently been funded, are a number of research centres looking specifically at business and local government data, at what can be done with those kind of data in gaining better access to those kind of data. Coming up, there's not yet, I believe the call hasn't yet gone out, but the third phase will be looking at what we can do with third sector and social media data. That, I think, is going to be quite interesting. So a little bit about how we work. Currently, eligible researchers are anyone in UK academic institutions, anyone in UK government departments. We also allow access to anyone who's currently on the list of eligible research organisations for funding through the RC UK. And from February, we're going to start investigating the possibilities, well, not the possibilities, we are going to start investigating how we can allow access for third sector partners. And we'll be doing quite a lot of work with third sector partners existing. I can see Tracy there from NPC, who we've been working with a little bit so far, and we'll be working with Charity Commission and the Commission for Voluntary Organisations to understand both how we can most safely give access to that sector, but also what that sector's needs are, which will tend to be somewhat different from researchers in government and academia. So that will be ramping up more in February. So a little bit about how it works. If you'd like to get access to data through the Administrative Data Research Network, one thing that makes us stand slightly apart from many services that have gone before is that we don't actually require you to come and tell us exactly what data you need, because we're well aware of the fact that the knowledge of what exists in terms of administrative data in this country is not huge. I mean, we have experts that have huge amounts of in-depth information in specific areas, but there's very few people, in fact, no one that I've yet met, I'm still searching for someone, so if anyone here does know, please talk to me, who has a really good overview across the whole of government. This is an incredibly challenging area. So we're quite happy for researchers to come to us and say, we have this incredibly interesting, very valuable research project that we believe may be served by administrative data. The survey data aren't there. Can you find us administrative sources that will serve us? And we'll help researchers in trying to locate those resources and eventually to negotiate access to those resources. So if you contact the Administrative Data Service, we will talk you through whether you are a suitable candidate. We're somewhat a service of last resort. It is very much our principle that if another service could adequately serve your purposes, we will direct you to that. Something like the UK Data Service, the UK Data Services Secure Lab, the HMRC's Secure Lab. There are a number of services out there that are probably currently a lower level of entry. We have quite a lot of requirements for entry due to the fact we're aware that we're dealing with very sensitive areas. So you make an application. Once we're convinced that it's appropriate, we will then work with you to work up an application which will go to the independent approvals panel. They will assess whether it's been under ethical review. They will not do the ethical review themselves. We'll work with the researcher to pass the project through a suitable ethical review process. They will also get some information on the potential privacy impact and the feasibility of the project. The feasibility will be judged in terms of the research team's ability to do the work. Now, if the skills aren't there, that doesn't automatically mean that you're not eligible. We will help researchers in trying to find training that will upskill them to enable them to get to a stage where the project is feasible. Whether the project can be supported by the Research Data Centre, whether they have the capacity to research the project. And at this stage, a fairly light touch on have the potential data providers said out of hand that there is no way they would support a project like this. We're not looking at whether they can find the legal gateway at that time, because we want the burden on the data owners to be relatively light before we know that we're actually definitely going to go forward with the project. So we'll just ask them, this is the project that's being proposed. Do you think this would be rejected out of hand? So that will go forward in the feasibility report. So then, taking those issues into account, the panel will be particularly making the judgment as to whether the potential privacy impact balances against, is outweighed by the public benefit and the scientific merit, particularly the public benefit. That's the key for us. Because these are administrative data that are provided by the public, the key for us is that all research has to have quite an explicit potential public benefit so that the public can see that their data are being well used for appropriate purposes. Once the project's been approved, we have a two-track process. In the background, the Administrative Data Service, with the help from our Administrative Data Research Centres, will be negotiating for access for the data for that project. In the meantime, the researcher will go through a training programme. This is based on existing training programmes that have been well tested through the UK Data Service, Secure Lab, through the ONS's Virtual Microdata Laboratory, and through the HMRC Data Lab. All of those labs are currently working together with us to develop what will be a generic training programme across all of those services. So yes, and the negotiation goes on at the same time. We then have one of the principles of our network is the principle of a trusted third party for linkage. We do not carry out the linkage ourselves, nor do our research data centres. We have partner organisations. Each of our research data centres have partner organisations. So, for example, the Office for National Statistics are acting as a trusted third party linker for us. The NISRA in Northern Ireland, National Health Wales, I believe, are acting as one for Wales, and there is scope to bring in other trusted third parties dependent on various conditions. So what we would do is then we would request the data owner to separate all the identifying information from all the analytic information. It's an absolute principle of the network that these sets of information are never together at the same time. So the people that see the identifying information never see what I've recently heard quite often referred to as the payload data. So anything that has your health information, tax, any other information about you is never in the same place as your identifying information. So the trusted third party will make a link, will link the IDs together from the various data sets, create an index that will then be used to link the analytical data in. So in that way, we are attempting to keep people's information as confidential as we possibly can. And actually, in some work we did in advance of the network getting up and running, we did some work with ONS, the SRC, and Ipsos Mori, looking at what public perceptions of these things was. And that separation principle proved to be a very powerful message to the public. That was very reassuring. I actually sat in on a couple of the focus groups myself, and at the point when the focus groups threw the person's identification data over their shoulder into a bin, I had to say I was very impressed with the accuracy of the shot. You could hear the whole table just breathe a sigh of relief and say, oh, okay, that's all right then. So we're sticking to that as a very strong principle of our linking process. The analysis will take place in a secure environment. There'll be levels of security in that environment, the most secure being on-site at one of our research data centres, in an environment where you can't take in your phone, you can't take in a laptop, you can't take in pen and paper. We have specially coloured paper that people can use within the environment. So if someone sees you walking out with a large pad of yellow paper, people know you shouldn't be taking it out. So a very highly controlled environment with constant supervision. The second, the kind of intermediate safe setting is likely to be an upcoming program that the SRC is working on. I believe MRC are also working on rolling out standalone safe settings, which we're referring to safe pods, which can sit in university libraries, much like just a standalone secure environment. And the third will be what is currently allowed for some access through the secure lab at Essex University, which will be some desktop access with conditions on overlooking screens, that kind of thing. So there will be various degrees of access. The suspicion is, the assumption is that in the first instance, a lot of it will be on-site in the secure environment because we need to start as safely as we possibly can. Data never leave the RDCs. Everything is a remote access. All analysis is done is within that safe environment. Any data any outputs, any statistical outputs, any results that researchers wish to take out have to be submitted to the RDC staff for manual checking before they're released. That way we ensure that no data is being released that might endanger an individual. We check cell sizes, maximum, minimum, that kind of thing. There's a fairly large amount of... But this should be... we'll assume this is going to be a collaborative process between the researcher and the RDC staff. It's not going to be a case of we will say these are the rules, this is what will pass, this is what won't pass. We'll have a rough set of rules that these type of analyses are usually safe, these type of analyses are usually dangerous, and it will be on the onus on the researcher. If it's an analysis that we think is dangerous, it will be the onus on the researcher to explain to us why they think they're safe, and if they can make a valid case for that. In that way, we think this is a process that's been working quite well in the ONS, the HMRC, and in Essex University already, and it enables us to work with the most innovative of researchers without having to have that degree of intelligence and skill ourselves, which obviously can be quite difficult. If you are a top econometrician, it's unlikely you're going to be sitting checking someone else's outputs all the time. So it enables us to support those top econometricians and learn from their experience and their knowledge, and vice versa as well. And a condition of access to the network will be that a maximum 2-page plain English summary of your research will be required at the end of the project. This will be absolutely mandatory, even if, and to some extent, particularly if it hasn't worked. We're even interested in finding out, we thought these data would serve, but they didn't because, therefore, we couldn't finish our project. That's going to be very valuable feedback to us as well. And this is particularly important because For those of us who've been in this field providing data support for quite a long time, the constant grumble we hear from government departments is, I put in all these resources to giving you all these data and I never hear anything back from you. So it goes into incredibly dense academic papers that many government and policymakers, even analysts, don't have the time to read. So what we're very keen to do is to make sure both the public understand what's been done with the data, but also the government departments who are providing these data understand what's been done. So from our public engagement, we did some public engagement with Ipsos Mori. Things we learned: transparency, absolutely vitally important. We will provide information on our website. Pretty much we will say everything we're doing in all ways as far as we can. They were very keen on independence. They need the independence of the approvals panel was very important, independence from government in particular, and most strongly independence from commercial interests was a message that was put to us very, very strongly. That's the reason why initially we won't be providing access for commercial research. That's something that our board is going to look at more long term, but at this stage we are not planning to do that. As I said a little bit, public's very keen to know that the information is de-identified, how the linkage is carried out. As I said, we were quite surprised by the strength of the opposition to commercial usage. The public benefit has to be clear. The public want to understand where the benefit lies. So it can't just be an idea that, well, we in our ivory towers think there's public benefit. It has to be explained in a way that the public can explicitly see. And the message needs to be understandable and accurate. There's a tendency of saying, oh, well, this is far too complicated, the public won't understand. We don't feel that that's a valid excuse. We have to find a way to couch the message so that they will understand. And if we're doing things in too much of a complicated way, then we have to look at a way of doing things in a simpler way that people will understand and accept. There's no point saying, well, we're cleverer than you, we're just going to get on with it. That's not a valid way of going about things in our view. So we're involving the public in decision-making. We're going to have an ongoing public engagement process. The whole thing's a consultation. We're very aware that we're doing something very new. We've not opened up and said, right, we've got everything right. We know exactly what we're doing. We're aware that as we go on, we're going to learn, we're going to have to make changes, we're going to have to communicate these changes, the reason for them. We're doing quite a lot of engagement with the Cabinet Office on the data sharing legislation. We're talking to privacy campaigners to try and understand what their concerns are, to make sure we address those. And we're very prepared for a fairly intense scrutiny over what we're doing because of the level of transparency and public engagement we're doing. We know that's attracting attention to us and we have to be very ready to answer questions. The primary goal is public benefit, and our mission statement is to benefit society and quality of life through intelligent social research and to place the UK at the forefront of innovative social and economic research. Thank you very much.